Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode. I'm your host, Charlie Mathis, and I'm so excited to get started. My idea for this podcast, as this is just the first episode, is I'm going to go through every Power Four conference. We're going to start with the Big 12. I'm going to do half of a conference per episode. So the Big 12 has 16 teams, not 12, as you would think. And so I'm going to go through the first eight, and I'm going in opposite order of the standings in 2025. So we're going to start at the bottom with Oklahoma State, who were a perilous 1-11, and we're going to go all the way up to the Big 12 champions, Texas Tech, who were 12-2. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here today. I figure we should just hop right in and get started. So the first team is Oklahoma State. They went 1-11 in 2025 with their one win coming over UT Martin. Ouch. They lost to Tulsa 19-12 in a bit of a rivalry there, a bit of an in-state rivalry. That was Tulsa's first win over them since 1998. They've played 10 times in that span, and Oklahoma State has won every time since then. And of note, Tulsa wasn't really any good. They finished the season 4-8. So they weren't even, some powerhouse group of six school. Their other out-of-conference game was Oregon, and I hope I don't have to tell you how that went. They got pummeled. And Mike Gundy, who was the head coach at Oklahoma State, leaves after 18 straight years of getting a bowl. And then he went 3-9 in 2024. And after a 1-2 start in 2025, he decided he was done. He was tired and he couldn't keep up with the transfer portal era, which we kind of have seen from a few coaches now. I think Dabo Swinney is kind of in that era. I wonder if, we're going to be seeing the last few years of Dabo Swinney as well, but that's another story. Mike Gundy leaves. Obviously, they don't do too well because they don't win another game. But the new coach, Eric Morris, should give a lot of hope to Oklahoma State. He's an offensive-minded coach. He comes from North Texas, and he brings some guys with him. He's a QB developer. He developed Cam Ward at Incarnate Word before he transferred to Miami, and he developed Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech when he was working there. So now to their actual team and how much they changed. They had the number one recruiting class in the Big 12. I will say, though, I think that is a little bit of a misconception there. Their number one recruiting class is because they needed an entire new team. I mean, they are returning essentially zero starters. Their entire defense left. Their entire offense either graduated or entered the transfer portal. But so let's talk about some of the recruits that they got out of the transfer portal, especially coming from North Texas. The big one and the headline recruit, obviously, is Drew Mestemaker, one of the top QBs in this transfer portal class. He was a 5-star, so clearly their best recruit out of the transfer portal. Eric Morris also brings over Caleb Hawkins, who was starting running back for North Texas, and Wyatt Young, who was also a starting wide receiver who got significant playing time. They also have other notable transfers, Justin Bowick and Chris Barnes, who are both 4-star receivers. Also, Miles Coleman is a wide receiver from UNT, and Rodney Harris II. So there is actually a lot of wide receivers coming in here, and you can tell why. It's because they all want to play with Drew Mestemaker, clearly. That being said, they have no returning starters at wide receiver. They literally have none. Same thing with running back. Same thing with QB. They have one QB from their QB room, Noah Walters, who unfortunately he was a walk-on. He is never going to get significant playing time. So yeah, that's kind of the story with Oklahoma State, is just they need a whole new team, and that's why their transfer portal rankings are so good. They are losing their tight end, they're losing every single offensive lineman, but their right guard, Jacoby Sanders, who was decent in 2025. That being said, they're bringing in about 7 offensive line transfers. You'll probably see Braden Nelson from UNT go into that left tackle role, which is obviously one of the most important roles on the field. Joseph Hansen figures in at right tackle, and you've got a lot to figure out behind that. So they're going to be a team that needs to figure out who they are. Their defensive line, basically everyone's leaving. Demarion Thomas and Jaleel Johnson are still here, but they lost all their depth And it'll be interesting to see if they keep their starting roles at defensive tackle and defensive end, because you're bringing in James Williams from Florida State, Braylon Rigsby from Texas Tech, and I White from Penn State. So there are a lot of actually top tier transfers. And I White, who was a 4-star out of high school. So these are guys that actually could make a difference on that defensive line. Same thing with linebacker. Your best 3 linebackers are all out. Wendell Gregory stays. He's a redshirt freshman. But other than that, you'll probably see transfers like Ethan Wisłowski, Isaiah Chisholm come in and fill those roles. Their entire secondary is gone. They have no starters, no one who got any significant playing time. The only guy who got any significant playing time is LaDainian Fields. He had 2 tackles and 2 interceptions. So he was fine. He was a bit of a ball hawk at the safety role, but nevertheless, they're bringing in a lot of guys, and that'll be really interested to see. And this will be a theme that I'm going to talk about kind of throughout the whole Big 12, is that they don't play defense. They do not play defense in the Big 12. You look at the scores, they're 40-35, which is something you're not seeing in other conferences like the SEC or the Big 10. I think that might be what's holding them back, but I think that's kind of what we're going to see out of Oklahoma State, is that their offense has all the potential in the world, especially because Eric Morris is a very offensive-minded coach. The defense is the big question here. I will say, I think that maybe their ceiling in 2026, I think probably around 6-6. I bet their defense will hold them back. Maybe they could get to 7-5. I bet bowl eligible or a little above, maybe 8-4 is like their top ceiling. But you never know, because you see coaches come in all the time and just bring a program from 0 to all the way to the top. I don't think that's going to happen here. But what I don't think we're going to see is, I don't think we're going to see a team that goes 1-11 again or anywhere near that. I think their floor would be just missing a bowl game. 5-7 to 8-4. I really like Eric Morris. I really like Drew Mestemaker, and I like what they're bringing in. Moving on now to the 15th place team in the Big 12, Colorado. Dion and his team went 3-9. Yikes, in 2025. That's 1-8 in conference. They had a bit of a funky season. Their only wins are Delaware and Wyoming, right? Which are pretty reasonable. But then they upset number 22, Iowa State. So those are their 3 wins. Iowa State is their 1 in-conference win. Granted, they had a fairly hard schedule, but it was a very funky season. It kind of had me questioning, Dion, what the hell are you doing? He used like 3 different QBs. They all got significant playing time. It was a weird season. But going into 2026, there is something exciting for them. They're bringing over Brennan Marion, who's a new offensive coordinator from Sacramento State. He's bringing some guys with him, and he's going to implement this go-go offense that he's gotten kind of famous for. People are pretty excited for this. It's an offense that utilizes 2 running backs, and it's focused on creating mismatches. I read up on it. It's kind of cool. It's new. I think these new offenses can kind of surprise people. It's like a mix between a triple option and a spread offense. You're trying to spread the offense horizontally so that the defense has to tell you how many people are in the box, so they can't have those linebackers go and cover a slot guy or a tight end. It's always under center, though, which is the weird thing. Julian Lewis is a quarterback that is mobile, but he's a pocket passer. So I think that'll be interesting to see what they do there. Julian Lewis, who was a former 5-star recruit, and he was one of the guys who got some playing time. Caden Salter was the best starter, and then Ryan Staub also got 3 games. So there were 3 different quarterbacks that got significant playing time. There was some inside issues there, I think. I think you can't really know what's happening there, but nevertheless, Julian Lewis is slated to start for sure as a sophomore. And Brennan Marion brings over 2 running backs and 1 wide receiver from Sacramento State. Michael Welch is the incumbent running back. He was basically Colorado's RB2 last year. They lost in the portal Omarion Miller, who was a 4-star transfer wide receiver. They do bring in DeAndre Moore, who is a 4-star wide receiver transfer from Texas, and so he could be kind of the star of this wide receiver room. Joseph Williams is the only guy they're keeping from this wide receiver room that got, significant playing time. So it is kind of a new offense, and I would say it's pretty volatile. They've got offensive line questions through and through. They keep one starting offensive lineman, their right tackle, Larry Johnson. They didn't bring in anyone too impressive. Javen Richardson from my Mizzou Tigers and Taj White from Rutgers. But they did get 8 offensive line transfers, so it'll just be a battle of who earns a starting spot, and so that'll be something to watch going into camp for sure. They had the number 4 transfer portal in the Big 12, which makes it the 23rd nationally, so not bad. But like I said, kind of with Oklahoma State, it's because they lost their whole defense. I mean, they had no starters on the D-line return. They had no starters in the linebacker core return, and their secondary is the same thing. So they are bringing in entirely new team, essentially. They raided the portal. Their incoming linebacker, Lanoa Lafau, and incoming corner, Boo Carter, are definitely their best gets. Those guys are 4 stars out of the portal 4 stars. That being said, though, no defense is played in the Big 12. So if you have a good offense, you're kind of king in the Big 12. And I think that's what we could see here. I think the go-go offense is exciting. I think it's new, and I think it could shock some people. Looking at their 2026 schedule, they get Texas Tech, K-State, and Utah at home for what that's worth. But they do have to go to Georgia Tech as the second year of a home-and-home series. They lost to Georgia Tech at home in 2025. They go to Arizona State and they go to Cincinnati as well. So kind of a middle of the pack schedule, not too easy, not too hard. We'll see what Brendan Marion does, and we'll see if if Coach Prime can figure out how to use just one quarterback, which is, I know, a novel idea. Moving now to West Virginia, they have basically one exciting thing, and I'll get into it, but this is the second year of Rich Rodriguez as the head coach, and they had the 3rd recruiting class in the Big 12, but their transfer portal ranking was 13 of 16 in the Big 12. They also had a bit of an odd season. They lost to Ohio 17-10, but they beat Pitt and they beat Houston when they were ranked 22. So very much an odd season for them as well. They were 4-8 in the Big 12. That's 2-7 in conference, with Pitt and Houston being those only 2 in-conference wins. They beat Robert Morris University as an out-of-conference win. So, like I said, a very funky season for them. Their best transfer, I want to hammer this home, is Cam Cook, who kind of went under the radar. I would have expected him to go somewhere else. I'm a little surprised that he didn't go to an Alabama, go to the SEC or the Big Ten. He is the incumbent leading rusher in the country for D1. They have a new QB in Michael Hawkins as well from OU, but he is also going to compete with Scotty Fox Jr., who got the most playing time as a true freshman. So that would be really interesting to watch. I think that is going to be a bit of a QB battle there, with Michael Hawkins probably getting the edge in that QB battle just because he was a 4-star. He was at OU. He played as a backup for a little bit. So I really like him, and I think he's got some potential. And I also like Cam Cook, and I think he's got all the potential in the world. It's clearly his backfield. They didn't bring in any transfers other than him. They're not keeping any incumbent running backs who got any playing time. It is the Cam Cook show at West Virginia, and I'm very excited for it. I think West Virginia fans should be extremely excited for it. And we'll see what he can do when he moves to a Power 4 conference like the Big 12. That being said, I think it would be great for him because, like I said, no one plays defense. Jaheim White, Sincere Bowers, and Dior Hubbard, all incumbent running backs gone to the portal. So it's essentially a whole new team from the portal, especially the defense. And I want to hammer that home as well. The offensive line does keep their left tackle and their center, which are arguably the 2 most important positions. That's Nick Craigie and Landon Livingston. So for what it's worth, they do have some experience there. And they brought in 3 transfers: Cameron Griffin, Amare Grayson, and Karsten Cassidy. And that's the thing, is that Rich Rodriguez was the coach at Jacksonville State, where Cam Cook, Amari Grayson, and Cameron Griffin all went. And it's interesting to me that they took this long. They waited a year to transfer to West Virginia. Maybe they wanted to see, all right, do I like Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia? And a 4-8 season in your first year as a head coach isn't horrible. You know, we've seen people do worse. Moving now to UCF, they went 5-7 in the Big 12. They had losses to KU, Kansas State, Cincinnati. They ended the season pretty poorly. And of course, their wins over Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T and killed Bill Belichick's Tar Heels. Granted, everyone did, though. And they beat West Virginia, who we were just talking about. So they had a good season, a fine season for Scott Frost's first year back as a head coach. He's still going to be rebuilding this program, obviously, but I think we're going to see him be better in 2026. And I think Scott Frost is a guy that you have to talk about because he led UCF to a 13-0 season in 2017, and he claimed a national championship that year. So in his second year back at UCF, he we'll see what he can do. That being said, he's last in transfer portal rankings and last in recruiting rankings. So he doesn't have anyone great coming in. He's never been known to be a great recruiter. Maybe that changes with UCF being in the Big 12 now as a Power 4 school, but we're not seeing it this year. The QB is going to be really interesting because Taven Jackson, who looks like he wasn't leaving, did enter the transfer portal and went to UNT. And so he brings in Alonzo Barnett III from James Madison University and Keone Jennings from Florida International University. Two guys that have a lot of experience, and I think that'll be a true QB battle as well. Again, I think those guys, you're looking at the starters right there. You're looking at who's going to start. It's one of those two. And behind them, it'll be Brock Hansel, but this is a fairly thin QB room behind Barnett and Jenkins. So we'll see what happens there. Running back is similar. Duke Watson and Landon Chambers are the two guys coming in from the transfer portal. No one who had significant playing time in 2025 is staying. And that will be the story kind of for this UCF team down their lineup. They lost their whole O-line. Most of their defense is gone. They're keeping Lewis Carter, who was a junior linebacker who played very well in 2025. But other than that, it'll probably be running back by committee as it was last year with Jaden Nixon and Miles Montgomery. Their best transfers on defense, RJ Jackson, who's not a transfer, but he'll continue to start on the D-line, and transfers Bruno Dahl and Ken Talley are projected to be the starters. There could be some competition there, but Bruno Dahl showed out at Akron, and so I think they want to give him a chance at this high of a level. And Ken Talley, who was a former blue chip at Arkansas, are transferring in. Those guys will be the starting edge rushers, and RJ Jackson Jr., who got some playing time last year, is going to be the starting D tackle, most likely, unless, barring some oddities. As for their secondary, they actually keep much of their secondary. Their linebacker core is what is leaving, but their secondary, they keep much of it. They lose their top free safety, Philip Dunham, but it looks like Caleb Flagg from Mizzou is going to fill that role pretty well, and he was solid at Mizzou when he got playing time, and he was highly touted. He was injured for a good deal of the season, but he played very well when he was not injured. You also bring in Ty Bartram, who was a great standout free safety from Harvard, so I think those guys could battle for that role. And then, you keep both of your starting corners, Jaden Bellamy and Antoine Jackson. So I really like this secondary, and I think they could have one of the better defenses in the Big 12. As for their schedule, they miss Texas Tech and Utah. They get BYU at home, so it's arguably the easiest schedule in the Big 12. And they play at Pitt and Houston, which is rough, but, again, you'd rather not have to play Tech and Utah. So, I think that they could be pretty good in 2026. I don't think they're going to be at the top of the Big 12 by any means, but I think they could take a step forward. I think more than they got 5 wins. Do I see them being bowl eligible? Maybe. I mean, there is a lot of question marks. They've got a QB battle. They're going to have a running back battle. So I think there's question marks to this team, and I think they're going to be an interesting one to watch out of the Big 12 in spring practices. But I think I see them going 6-6, maybe a little better than they were last year, but not a top team by any means. Moving now to the Kansas Jayhawks, and I know I'm a Mizzou homer, but I will try to be fair to them. I promise. I got to watch Mizzou play KU this year. It was very fun, and Of course, they got kind of destroyed. They went 5-7 as well, same as UCF, but they went 3-6 in conference. So they did win a conference game. I'm going to pull up their projected depth chart here. Let that load. So their coach is Lance Leipold, and they were in the bottom quarter of Big 12 recruitment and poll rankings. So he's not known as a recruitment guy. And under Lance Leipold, they've never been super great. But they do have 30 guys coming in via the transfer portal and 25 leaving, so they weren't robbed by any means. This is Lance Leipold's fifth season, so he's been there for a good amount of time. They have wins over Fresno State, Wagner, West Virginia, UCF, and Oklahoma State in the Big 12. And so they didn't win any games that they weren't supposed to. Like, they didn't shock anyone. I think West Virginia and UCF were easy to beat. Obviously, Oklahoma State lost to everyone in conference. So yeah, they really didn't wow me by any means in 2025. The one thing I will say is I think you got to move on from Jalen Daniels. I saw that guy play in the Liberty Bowl in like 2022 or something when I was still in high school. So I think it's good that you're moving on from him because he is old. I mean, he's like a sixth year senior. So I think Kansas should be happy to get rid of him. He was good, he was fine, but he wasn't gonna take you to the promised land or anything. They do have a QB coming in from the transfer portal from Rice, Chase Jenkins, who was fine. He started for Rice last year, threw for 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. He's a dual threat, kind of like Jalen Daniels. He's most likely gonna be the starter. There's a possibility that Cole Ballard, a former walk-on, starts, but it's most likely Chase Jenkins's role to lose is the way I would put it. Kind of a revolving door at running back if you just move down their depth chart here. Daniel Highshaw Jr., LaShawn Williams, Johnny Thompson Jr., Harry Stewart III, all gone. Those are the only guys to get significant playing time in 2025. I do think it's pretty exciting. Dylan Edwards, I'm a little surprised he wasn't a 3-star, or it wasn't a 4-star in the portal. He was a 3-star, which is a little odd to me because he was good 2 years ago at Kansas State, and before that at Colorado. He didn't play in many games at K-State, but he was a former 4-star recruit, and we'll see what he can do. Same thing, they bring in Jalen Dupree from Colorado State, Yassine Willis from Syracuse, so just a lot of new blood in that running back core. You keep a lot of your starting wide receivers as well. You're graduating your best tight end, arguably, but you're bringing in 2 transfer guys, both of whom were walk-ons, so you'll probably see Carson Brunn move into that tight end role. As for the O-line, you graduate the entire right side, but you keep your left tackle and your left guard. You are bringing in some good transfers there from Texas, Oklahoma State, and Mizzou. They're losing a few seniors on the defensive line. Sophomore starter Leroy Harris, who had 19 tackles and 5 sacks, stays. And so I think that's pretty good for them. Same thing with Blake Harold, who's a sophomore starter. So the defensive line is actually keeping a lot of production. You graduate DJ Withers, Tommy Dunn Jr., and Justice Finkley. But I think you're getting more, like, I think this defensive line is going to be better in 2026 than it was in 2025. You're bringing in David Santiago, who was kind of a standout at Michigan State. He was pretty good. Also a former walk-on. He had 14 tackles and 2 sacks at the edge position. So we'll see what he does with more playing time. But he was good in his limited playing time at Michigan State. As for the linebacker core, you graduate all of your starters, essentially. Trey Lathan, Bengali Kamara, and John Kamara all entered the portal, transferred, graduated. So there is a good deal of turnover on defense, but they do bring in a lot of transfers from the portal, namely Davion Crouch and Quincy Davis at the linebacker core. DBs, they actually keep their two starting cornerbacks and their free safety. So, and they're bringing in a ton of guys in the transfer portal. A lot of those guys are going to fill some depth positions because they're losing a lot of their depth. Although I do think that this secondary is going to be better than it was in 2025. You're bringing in not guys who are super highly touted, but guys who are experienced. And this is what we've seen from, like, for instance, Indiana, is you see guys who only have 1 year left of eligibility, 2 years left. Elijah Cannon has 3 years, but he's one of the only transfers in this secondary that has more years of eligibility and doesn't have a ton of experience. So that's going to be huge for them, is your guys don't have to be, we saw Curt Cignetti win the college football championship this year just by getting guys who were former 3 stars, former walk-ons even, who have a lot of experience, and that's really the name of the game. They get BYU and Mizzou at home in 2026. For what it's worth, I think they lose both of those games probably, but they do have to go to Utah and K-State, which is tough. They do avoid Texas Tech, so it is a hard schedule in the Big 12, I would say. How they do 5 and 7? I kind of see them the same, honestly, in 2026. They're not, they're graduating their longtime starting QB, so it begs the question if Chase Jenkins is going to be as good as Jalen Daniels. And I think the easiest answer right now is no. I don't think he's going to be. I think their defense improves, which could win them some Big 12 games. Because if you have an elite defense in the Big 12, you are really able to lock up some of these offenses. That being said, I think they have a tough schedule. I am not a huge fan of it. I think they go 5 and 7. I have them regressing, if anything, and I don't think they're going to be bowl eligible in 2026. Moving now to Baylor, the biggest portal acquisition for them is DJ Lagway. They see it as huge. Their head coach, Dave Aranda, who's never really been known as a recruiter, their defense is trending down. Their offense is trending down, but we'll get into it. DJ Lagway, I want to talk for like just a few seconds about him. I think Billy Napier broke him. He's a transfer quarterback from Florida. He started as a true freshman and he was frankly terrible. We'll see if he can figure it out in Baylor. Like, I want the best for him, but I look at Sawyer Robertson, their last starter, and I like him better than I like DJ Lagway. So, like I said, we'll see there. Maybe Lagway can prove me wrong with a guy that's not Billy Napier, but I am not a believer. They had a bad recruiting class, but they had a decent transfer class, which is kind of all that matters in this era of college football. They have a young running back room. Their starter last year, who got the bulk of 154 rushing attempts, Caden Knighton got 104, but a very clear RB1 and RB2, 185 yards and 6 touchdowns to 460 and 1. Bryson Washington, that number 1 guy, transferred to Auburn, but you do keep your RB2, who has to move into that RB1 role because you don't get a transfer running back out of the portal. Michael Trigg is a really interesting guy to talk about. He was one of the top 5 tight ends in the country last year, and he graduates. So probably Matthew Klopfenstein is going to take over that role, but you could also see Tony Livingston. I think tight end is a really interesting position because these schools that consistently have good tight ends, it's like that is your scheme. You always want a tight end that you can throw to instead of just, oh, we happen to have this guy who's really good. It's like that is part of your game plan. For their 5 offensive linemen graduated, you have a ton of transfers coming in. You've got 6 coming in, so that'll be a battle to watch in the spring. Same thing with the defense. I mean, you graduate some guys, but arguably you have better people. Hosea Wheeler comes in from Indiana, and he is fairly highly touted. I believe he's a 4-star transfer. So I don't know. I think this defense is going to be better than it was in 2025 because I think they got some good transfers on the defense. They, especially on the D-line with Hosea Wheeler. There's a good deal of turnover, but I think they'll probably be better than they were. They also just barely missed a bowl game. I bet Baylor goes 6 and 6 or 7 and 5. I like them better. I think DJ Lagway and Hosea Wheeler are the biggest gets on this team. Cincinnati, after losing the first game to Nebraska, they win 7 in a row. And then they end the season on a 4-game loss streak. So a very streaky season for them. They had a hard end of the season. Brendan Sorsby, who was their longtime starter QB, very good, leaves via the transfer portal. He goes to Texas Tech, actually. And so J.C. French from Georgia Southern is the guy you get in the portal to replace him. I mean, I know he's not great. I actually, a little bit of an aside here, I actually played with him on College Football 2025, which obviously doesn't matter, but he was bad for what it's worth. He wasn't my best quarterback there. But yeah, you have Brennan Sorsby leaving for Texas Tech, and that's kind of the story with your whole offense. You graduate almost your whole running back room. You keep Zion Johnson, who was the clear RB3. He barely got any playing time. You graduate or transfer all your wide receivers except for Isaiah Johnson, who did have 3 touchdowns and like 200 yards last year. So he is going to start. You do bring in a lot of transfer wide receivers, namely from FCS schools and from group of six schools. The best one is probably Cade Wolford from Kent State, who finished with 500 receiving yards. Lorenzo Fenner from South Dakota had 1,000 yards, and Malachi Henry had 900 yards, essentially. So these are guys who had standout seasons. We'll see how they do in the Big 12, but I think that's a good wide receiver core for JC French. The other option is Liam O'Brien at QB. It'll be interesting. I think that'll be a QB battle there, which is important to note. But I think they've got the core and they've got the potential. They just have to put it all together. You only graduate two of your offensive linemen, so you do have a lot of returning starters. Same thing on the defense, honestly. Lots of returning starters, except for your linebacker core. You have one of three starters leaving. That's Jake Golday, and he was like by far the best guy on that linebacker core. Honestly, it's looking pretty good. You do bring in some transfers, but it'll probably just be internal guys stepping up on that linebacker core. Defensive line, you've got a lot of guys leaving and not many guys coming in. So their transfer portal gets weren't great, especially on the D line, but you're probably just gonna see guys like Marquese Parker, Jalen White McLean. They're gonna have to step up, especially in their junior and senior seasons. They're primed for a starting role because if not, that defensive line and that running defense is going to look very poor. What I will say about Cincinnati, I was looking at their schedule. They schedule like a powerhouse. I know they only went 7-6 in 2025, but they schedule like they're a team that's much better than they are. And I think that's good for them. Obviously, they lost to Navy in their bowl. They did have a lot of guys sitting out, though, to be fair. But I really like them, and I really like what they're doing. I think since they made the college football playoff a few years ago and then transferred to the Big 12, I think they're going about it the right way. And if you look at their future, just kind of in the next few years, not necessarily like the immediate future, I think that they could actually establish themselves as a top Big 12 program, just kind of the way they're going about it. Now, the eighth and final team in the Big 12 that we're doing today, this week, is TCU. 5-4 in conference, with out-of-conference wins over UNC, which, like I said, everyone beat Bill Belichick, Abilene Christian University, and SMU, who actually was fairly salty at times, in conference wins over Colorado, Baylor, West Virginia, and Houston. So it's not like they only beat the guys at the bottom. And then they beat USC in their bowl. So they had a pretty good season. They're kind of the first team we've looked at. Well, them and Cincinnati are the first teams we've looked at today that actually had like a respectable season, I would say. Now to look at their offense, Josh Hoover, who was a junior last year for his last year, is transferring to Indiana, and so he's going to be Kurt Cignetti's new guy. Got in Jaden Craig, though, who was that standout quarterback at Harvard. He passed for almost 3,000 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He added 150 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. So I am not unhappy by any stretch of the word with Jaden Craig. He's clearly going to be their starter. There's not even really any question about it. And so good for him. We'll see what he can do in his last year because he was a former walk-on at Harvard. We'll see what he could do in his last year, see if he can go to the NFL. But you're graduating your top running back, Kavorian Barnes, who accounted for 443 yards, but he got injured. And Jeremy Payne, actually, the sophomore, took over for the second half of the season, and he was arguably better. So I think this running back room, Jeremy Payne just moves up. John Denman, who was the RB3, is going to be the RB2. They look pretty similar to how they did last year. This wide receiver room, it's a similar story. Eric McAllister, your top receiver, is graduating, but you keep your wide receiver 2, you graduate your wide receiver 3, and you bring in Jeremy Scott from South Alabama, who factors in probably at a depth role, but he could be that wide receiver 3 guy. He is an outside guy like Jordan Dwyer, so you'll see what you can see there. The offensive line keeps a lot of the same guys. Same thing with the defense. Like you're graduating your top edge rusher on the D line, but then you bring in Chet Feely from Texas Tech, who is a former blue chip guy. And so I really like this TCU defense and I really like their O line. I really think that they could be better than they were in 2025. They were 9-4. I think they could win 10 games. I think they could compete for a Big 12 championship because, like I said, no one has a good defense in the Big 12. And so if you do, you are the king. That's why Texas Tech just killed everyone, unless their QB was out. They killed basically everyone. They graduate one starter in the secondary. It's free safety, Bud Clark. And then you bring in Jacob Fields, who was a standout at Louisiana Tech. Like, they did lose some guys, but for every guy they lost, they brought in someone who was arguably better. And so that's why TCU, I think, is kind of a sleeper. I know they went 9-4, so they can't be a true sleeper, but in my mind, they are a sleeper to compete for the Big 12. Especially you look forward at their schedule. They start with 3 home games. Well, pardon me. Their first game is going to be played in Ireland against UNC. We'll see what Bill Belichick rolls out, but I like them in that game. Then you get Grambling, Arkansas State. You play at UCF. You get BYU at home. You get Utah at home. You get K-State at home. Your toughest game is going to be against Texas Tech. But guys, frankly, I think they could go undefeated in the first 10 weeks of the season until they play Utah and Texas Tech. And I have no affiliation to TCU. I just really like their team. I really like their defense, and I think they could compete. So that's going to be it for this episode. I'm super grateful for everyone that tuned in. Catch us next week at Sandman for next episode when we go through Kansas State, Iowa State, Arizona, Houston, BYU, Tech, those guys that are more exciting. But I'm super thankful to everyone that came and watched. I have really high hopes for this podcast. Go follow Sandman on Instagram. Go follow him on Facebook, on YouTube. Go check out my other podcast, Curves, Chalk, and Chucks, which is with my good friend Charlie Butler. It's an MLB podcast if you're interested in that. A huge thanks to Eric and Brooke for making this possible. Peace, guys.